I'm here again with Preston Dennett. Today, we're going to discuss different categories of UFO encounters and particularly how they may or may not relate to Lake Shasta. Preston, do you want to outline what those types of encounters are? Which of them have been traditional? And then if there's been any new categories added to the mix over the last several years?
Yeah, the UFO phenomena, while it's been around for millennia, has it really only come under scrutiny recently, scientific studies since the modern age of the UFOs, 1947 and onward. So since then, people have been trying to, find ways to categorize this and quantify it and so forth. And J. Allen Hynek is very well known in this field. He's called the father of modern ufology. And he was the astronomical consultant for the Air Force's Project Blue Book, which is an official government UFO study group. And I'll put study group in quotes, kind of, because it's controversial. Right. And J. Allen Hynek became very much disenchanted with it because he felt that he discovered there was a cover-up and the best cases were not even reaching Blue Book. That's sort of a tangent, but at any rate, as astronomical consultant, it was his job to sort of see, come up with an explanation, an astronomical explanation for some of these sightings and see if there was one. And it was he who devised the first real categorization of this subject and divided these various types of encounters, because there's all different types, into three main categories, which would be close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. And a close encounter of the first kind is a simple sighting, often an anomalous light just darting around in the sky. Nothing really more than that. But these objects sometimes come much closer. And there was a smaller category of cases in which they were clearly affecting the environment in some way, perhaps landing and leaving, crushed grass or burned grass, or affecting the atmosphere in some way, or car engines or radios or what have you. They are affecting the environment. And that would be a close encounter of the second kind, one that affects the environment around this object. And an even more rare category would be close encounters of the third kind. And that's when people have direct contact. It's very much like we see in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Mm-hmm. Still one of my favorite movies, by the way, on this subject. And he appeared in it, by the way. He had a tiny little cameo.
Well, didn't they also have like those hand scanners that they had in the movie were actual hand scanners in S1, or sorry, S4 in Nevada, where Bob Lazar was? Like Bob Lazar had described these things, and those are the kind of the exact things he described. But I believe he described them before the movie came out. I don't know the timing on that, but there's some eerie coincidence between the two.
Yeah, well, the movie was very well done, and Spielberg clearly had done his research. And some of the events in there, like when Richard Dreyfuss is, stopped there on the road and his truck is rattling and the street sign is going ding, 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 ding. That's taken directly from the Loch Raven Dam case. And the I forget the guy's name, Stokes was his last name, a rocket scientist who had leaned out of his truck and got a sunburn from the UFO. So yeah, he took details from actual cases, so that these are the categories, right? Close encounters of the first, second, third kind. And then, of course, people started being taken on board, and people are talking about close encounters of the fourth kind. Mm-hmm. And more recently, this actually stretches back quite some time to the 50s and 60s, but in the 1990s, it really started to become popular. And I'm not sure who coined this first, but it's close encounters of the fifth kind, which is human-initiated contact. And this is differentiated from the other cases because this is more intentional, where someone, through some action of their own, is able to initiate or affect the behavior of a UFO. So by this, I mean going out and meditating or using lights to call them down, or when you're in the midst of an encounter, flashing your headlights and it communicates back to you, or this sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you, I was kind of on the forefront of research with this because let's see, it was in the early 1990s. I had interviewed this gentleman by the name of Arnie Weiler, who worked for NBC and was doing a little publicity stunt for NBC in Santa Monica at the George Page Museum outside. And they had set up these pitchel lights. Pitchel lights are big computerized lights that you can sort of program to flash in certain ways.
Mhm.
And they'd set them up with this special effects expert by the name of Rick Liebert in the shape of a peacock's tail for the NBC logo. And they turned them on and it was the shape of, almost a full disc. And these are big bright lights, and turned them on and they start flashing. And the guy I interviewed, Arnie Weiler, was shocked to see these two lights come swooping down out of the sky. And they got quite close. And he freaked out and he pointed them out to the guy who set up all this, Rick Lieber. And he's like, look, oh my God, what are those? Those look like UFOs. And Rick Lieber looks up at them and he's like, oh yeah, that happens all the time when I do this. So this is what the story Arnie Weiler is telling me. I'm like, you're kidding. He's like, no, couldn't tell you what these were. But I saw them come swooping down, hover, and then dart away as if they were inspecting what these were. I'm like, I want to talk to Rick Lieber. You got to put me in touch with this guy. He's like, sure, I know him. And he did. And I spoke with Rick Lieber and he verified that incident. And I'm like, well, Arnie said this. You said that there are other incidents like this. He's like, oh yeah, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. It's happened a lot. I'm like, well, can you tell me an example? If this has happened before, surely you can remember it. He's like, well, probably the best time was, I think it was 1978 or so, late 70s. And he had gone down to San Diego to do a publicity stunt for a radio station. And they contacted the FAA because they set up a 22-watt argon laser, a green argon laser, on the top of what was then the tallest building in San Diego. And turned it on, did the whole deal. There was like 10 people or so on top of this building. And this laser goes on and it plays in beat to various rock music, Pink Floyd and what have you. It was a publicity stunt.
Mm-hmm.
And he says they turned this thing on, shot the laser up in the sky, and this V-shaped objects come swooping down. And had circular lights along each V. And he said there was a second object quite high up, but this one came really low, about, he couldn't estimate for sure, but anywhere from 20 to 50 feet over the top of the building, low enough where it covered their entire view of the sky. And they could hear it. It made a low humming noise. And it was matte black, he said, really dark black with no reflection. And these very large circular lights, 3 or 4 along each V, and just moved slowly over the top of the building. And all 10 of them saw it. And I'm like, wow, so this is a close encounter of the 5th kind. Through some action of our own, we call this stuff down. And it was 1992, a gentleman by the name of Stephen Greer, a medical doctor, formed a group called CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and really sort of spearheaded the CE5 movement, which is now very popular. And there are many thousands of people doing this regularly. And he wrote a whole paper on this and actually cited my 2 cases. He was like, here's how you do it. Here's a case from Preston Dennett. This is the best one I could find. I'm like, whoa. And here's another case. And he cited a few more. And formed various chapters all across the US. And I, of course, became a charter member and listened to him speak. He came here to LA. And this was that same, this was August of 1992. I had just had a sighting up in Shasta, which we discussed in an earlier show, basically doing this sort of thing, using lights to call down UFOs. And he did his lecture. This is at the Marriott Hotel in Woodland Hills, which is, part of LA in a very densely populated area. And we found this little remote area 20 miles away on the edge of the city, Santa Susana, it's called. And it kind of overlooks LA, but it's, a couple of miles of wilderness around you. And brought a group of 40 people who had attended the lecture. Not everyone, just those who wanted to come there and see if we can call down a UFO. And I'm like, yeah, right, we're going to call one down. I was, finding out UFOs were real, ironically, made me more skeptical because I had to re-question everything.
Yeah, no, look, it seems when you talk about it, it seems, not you, but when people talk about this, it seems crazy, right? But my view is, it doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that I was not like a rabid believer.
Right.
At this point, I was just there because I wanted to see.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't hurt to try. Yeah.
And so we hiked down to this location, a lot of us, which was kind of awkward and slow, but we all kind of gathered in this little field. And honestly, no sooner did we got in there and someone shouts, "What's that?" And of course, we all look up, and way the heck up there, again, this had to be, I'm only guessing 20,000 feet up. I mean, high up there. This was this light, and it was enormous. It looked very much about the size, the apparent size, let me underline apparent size of a half moon. It was a glob of light, a blob in a very irregular shape. And at the zenith, straight up, and moving across the sky in a way that was far too quick to be anything normal. And I'm looking at it thinking, what is that?
Now, where was this again? You've already mentioned it, but
Santa Susana,
okay.
Which is just, let me see, it's in this northwest San Fernando Valley area.
Okay.
Just above Chatsworth. I mean, you can look this up on a map, but Southern California, outside LA. And everyone's gasping because, I mean, it's dramatic. I mean, you just don't see stuff like this every day. And it was, I don't know, 30, 40 stars put together. I mean, this was not a star-like object. This was massive. And, you see planes all the time, and they're, red light, a green light, a white light, and moving along, or a helicopter or satellites, tiny little star-like object. This was big. And
plus you can hear planes and helicopters.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at it thinking, well, we saw it for maybe 5 seconds, but in the first 3 seconds, I went, dum, 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 dum. Not any of these conventional things. And I'm not going to say it was an alien spacecraft because it looked strange to me. It was a blob of light, but I don't know how else to describe it. And I found it peculiar or coincidental, maybe, that it showed up right when we were going out there specifically to see something. Because this was not my first rodeo, so to speak, of going out there and looking for stuff. And we joined we had a little charter group of CSETI members, about 10 of us who were the core group. And over the next 5 years or so, we would go out once every couple of months or so and do this kind of work where we'd sit around, meditate, sort of put out the thought, I want to see a UFO, flash our lights, this sort of thing. And we were successful on a number of occasions.
Well, let's be more specific. So let's say someone were to do this. Let's start with kit. So what should they bring with them?
Well,
like if they had a packing list.
Yeah. Obviously warm clothes and things like this. And I don't mean to be facetious with that, but it's late at night and people will get cold and they end up retreating because they're not comfortable.
Mhm.
So you want to bring your basic survival gear, warm clothes, water, and so forth. But in terms of studying UFOs, camera is always a good idea. And not only that, but a recording device,
Mm.
because it's good if you can, bring this up to your mouth and start narrating what you're seeing. And it adds a level of corroboration, because details slip our memory very quickly.
Mhm.
And if you can record what's going on in various ways, this is very helpful. Because people, I mean, if you interview people who've at the scene of a car accident, they will give widely varying testimonies of what a suspect looks like, or any event. People feel like, oh, I don't remember it that way. So if you can immediately record what's happening, that's very helpful. A pad of paper to sketch what you saw is also very helpful. Anything to help record this. Compasses, because these objects are known for emitting magnetic fields.
Okay, so your compass might spin, things like that, right?
And in fact, there are on the market various UFO detectors, which are actually surprisingly simple and do work, and have, people have had these in their homes and they go off. Basically, it's something that detects a magnetic field, and it will shine a little light or give off an alarm. You run outside and boom, there's something flying over your house. So you can bring one of those if you're really into the whole technological aspect. You can bring all kinds of stuff: radiation detectors, compasses, magnetic.
Where would someone find that detector that you just mentioned? So it's just internet, or there's, can you go to like an REI or something?
I would just go onto the internet. There are various companies that sell these. I'm sure Amazon has a bunch of them. But ultimately, we used to bring very powerful flashlights. You can get basically those 500,000 candlewatt Hunter's lights, which are extremely bright. So bright you have to be careful using them, because you cannot shine them as a person's eyes. It could damage them. But we would bring those. Those are really cool because they shine up. They're very dramatic. And these days, people are bringing those little laser pointers, but you have to be very careful with those.
Oh yeah, you could blind somebody with them.
Not only that, they're illegal to flash at aircraft. You will be prosecuted if they find you, because it's blind
for the laser, or for the high powered light, or both?
The laser.
Okay.
The high powered light, not so much. Probably still not a good idea, but that's not going to completely dazzle a pilot. But those lasers are very focused beams, and people have been prosecuted for shining them at conventional aircraft.
And so for the audience, I would highly recommend using the flashlight and not the laser.
Yeah, and definitely do not. I mean, if you have a laser, that's fine. Just don't shine it at any craft. And if you see something you can't identify, don't shine it at it. Because I've talked to contactees who have brought this up, and they're like, no, do not shine it. They don't like it, they will leave. But if you're next to it, that's fine. So that is another tool. There are various technological tools, but ultimately, the trick to all this, and there's a lot more focus on this currently, is consciousness, is meditation. And the reason this works, and this is very effective, and is that this is how these guys communicate. What we're dealing with is not, a mysterious phenomenon. These are people. We're not the only people in the universe. And if you look into this phenomena, you will see at some point that what we're dealing with is people like us. People like us from elsewhere. They're more alike us than different. They have eyes, they have a nose, they have a mouth, they have heads, arms. They wear clothes, they fly craft. These are people. and they communicate through telepathy. People who have contact with, quote, ETs are generally communicated with telepathically. And this can be through sort of conceptually in imagery or in your home language. I mean, if you speak Spanish, they will come and say hola, or if it's, French, whatever, bonjour. They will generally speak in your home language, your primary language. And the point is they are very telepathic. And almost always when anyone has contact, it's mental. And so if you go out there and you all meditate and you sit in a circle and you put out the thought, I'd like to see a UFO. This is highly effective. And I've done this myself with the CSETI group for years. And
yeah, let's address that directly. So now that we kind of have a packing list, and you're already starting to go into this, what are the procedures to actually do this? And just for the audience, you actually did this on the Keeping Up with the Kardashians show, right? You explained you actually appeared on the show and explained how to do that. I think it's season 20, episode 4 or 5, something like that. People can find you on that.
yeah, it was one of their last shows they did.
Yeah.
They contacted me because they, heard about my research. And, I did this for the Travel Channel. I did one of their shows. I did it for the show Encounters. And they showed up on each of these times. I think they, it was, so this isn't as, difficult to do as you might think.
Yeah. So what are the steps to do? I mean, you already started talking into it. Oh, and then one quick question before you go into it. Is this something you can do alone, or do you have to be with a group to do it?
You can absolutely do it alone.
Okay.
I think it's more fun to do it with a little group, and perhaps even more effective. And what I found is it's most effective if you bring someone who's having contact, already, has had a lot of sightings, someone who's what I would call a contactee, an experiencer, and also someone who's a UFO virgin, someone who really wants to see a UFO and hasn't. Because we will go out there and sometimes often things don't show up. It's not like you go out every time and something shows up. No, not at all. I would say 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10 times that we went out there, we would see something. But what I noticed is when it worked best is we had a small group of 5 to 10 people. You go out late at night, not so much 9 or 10, but anywhere from midnight to 3 a.m. is probably your best bet. And in an area where there is known recent activity, this is not a prerequisite by any means, but it definitely, I think, ups your chances. So basically what you do is you bring your group of people, hopefully an experiencer if you can, and hopefully someone who's never seen it, and bring all your gear. You find a location that is, I'd say remote is better, not in a huge urban area. And definitely you want to do a little bit of research in terms of flight paths and regular conventional aircraft activity. So you don't get confused, like, is this a plane or is a helicopter? Research that. It's not hard to do. Locate any airports nearby and so forth. And find an area that's, fairly remote is best and known for UFO activity, and go out there late at night, sit in a circle, or, it doesn't have to be a circle, but do a meditation. And by that, I mean, just quiet your mind, project your consciousness outward, and mentally say, is there anyone out there? I'd like to see you. Put it forth with, imagination, intent, emotion, focus. And here is one of the keys, according to, some of the research done on this, is visualization. So what you want to do is you visualize your location from an aerial perspective. And this allegedly, I don't have any direct evidence of this, but this is the method that people have done that
That
it's proven to
seems to
be,
work.
yeah, is to visualize your location from an aerial perspective, which allows ETs to sort of find you. This is the theory behind it. And do that for, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And after that, you flash your lights upwards and make sure you have lookouts in each direction, and maybe have someone lie down on their back looking straight up. So you're covering the full sky, because often what will happen is, this is very brief. They'll come swooping down, do their little thing and take off. But they want to be seen. And I've talked to a number of contactees about this. They are eager to announce their presence to people who are seeking them out. And this works. I mean, like I said, I've done this numerous times myself. It's not just me, or it's not just CSETI. There's, other groups in various countries that have been doing this for a long time. And there are like contactees who go around doing this and effectively calling down UFOs. And that's how I had some of my best sightings, was going out with people who were contactees, because I'm like, I want to see one. And they're like, okay, I can do this for you. And I had some really amazing sightings that way. So this is what we would call a close encounter of the fifth kind. If you want to see a UFO, there are steps you can take that will increase your chances dramatically. I mean, you can just go outside at night in your backyard, lie on your roof, whatever, and wait. But if you mentally call them out, if you bring your flashlight, if you do these various protocols, it will measurably increase your chances of having an encounter. And more than likely, it's going to be a simple sighting. But be prepared, because this stuff can lead to, much closer encounters.
Yeah, that was actually my next. Well, that was my second to next question. The first is, how long do you typically have to go through these protocols before, in a given session, before you just, say it's not worth it? Is it like 2 hours, 10 minutes? And then the second question was exactly what you were going into. Are there any subsequent encounters that sometimes happen that are associated with calling down UFOs and having them kind of, having a visitation or an onboard experience, whether you like it or not, or whether you want one or not? So, those are the two questions.
Yeah. Well, many times, I've talked to people who got it their first time out. Boom, it happened. Other times it takes, weeks. I think the more effort and dedication you put forth towards this, the more successful you're going to be. If you just go out there once and it didn't happen, well, go do it for a couple of weeks. Do it in a what would I say, a routine fashion. So if you go out there like the same time every night, I think you're more likely to do it, or the same day every week, because this is a predictable way that the ETs are like, okay, he's going to come out, this time we're available and we know he's coming, or she. And I think that's more effective. So if you're, got a routine, and it can take a couple of months. But I think if you do this with full-on dedication and are really putting forth the effort and the focus and all of it, you will be successful. It might take a little while, but and of course I can't guarantee people are going to see stuff. But I think the more effort you put forth, the more successful you'll be. And generally it takes a month or two, depending.
And a month or two of like doing this once a week, every night. Okay.
Yeah. And another thing that is an interesting pattern that we found doing it with CSETI is, stuff wouldn't happen and we'd be packing up and getting ready to go, and that's when they would come. And there are a number of times where people were like leaving the group and driving home. And that's when they saw stuff. Or when they're walking into their door and they start seeing stuff individually. And yeah, people have started doing this work and started having series of sightings. And in some cases, it does ramp up to full on contact. I wouldn't say that that's super common. So I wouldn't like worry about, oh, if I flash a light in the sky, are they going to come and abduct me? No, no, I would not worry about that. That's not likely to happen. But the fact is, there are a lot of people who are into this already, might already be having some level of contact, and are trying to, gain some measure of control over this and investigate and figure out what's going on here and see if they can confirm this sort of thing. And if you've kind of fall into that category, that would be the type of person who's like suddenly finds themselves on board. Well, they already knew about you. You know that. You probably had sightings when you were a kid. And these, I know people who are going to UFO conventions, people who are interested in this subject in any real way, probably have some level of contact or awareness of the subject already. So,
Are there some people who have no experience in the past with this, but go through these protocols and then suddenly have regressive memories that come back? Any cases like that?
yeah, that can absolutely happen. People have a real tendency to explain away, debunk, deny, ignore anything that doesn't fit into their worldview. And they say, I've never seen a UFO. I'm like, well, have you had any unexplained experiences? And they're like, well, yeah, there was that flash of light, or, I had weird figures entering my bedroom when I was a kid. They don't connect the dots.
Right.
It's not unusual for someone to realize that they are a contactee in midlife, honestly, because of the way people are and the way we've kind of been dumbed down in society. This whole UFO phenomena has been ridiculed viciously. There is a cover-up. I mean, we talked about this in some of the previous shows.
Mm-hmm.
The Air Force explanation was hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions. If you think you saw something, you're sadly mistaken. And people accept this because we respect authority, or we used to, until they started lying.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's behooves each person to very carefully examine their past and, be as objective as possible. And, don't be fearful of this subject just because something is unexplained or unknown, or I don't, like I said, I've researched this subject for a very long time. I don't see anything to worry about in terms of, hostility, or is this dangerous, or, will I be abducted if I, flash a light into the sky? No. These are people like us. And in fact, it would be much easier to prove humanity is a hostile species than any of these ETs. But it's an absolutely real phenomenon. It's absolutely possible to see a UFO. It's not hard to do. It really is just a matter of going out there and doing the work. Where a lot of people are glued to their little cell phones. They're inside, they're working all day.
Mm-hmm.
Turn off your TV, turn off your computer, step outside, meditate, look up. There is stuff out there.
So just to tie this to the last episode with Mount Shasta, is any particular advice you would give to somebody going to Mount Shasta who tries to do this? In other words, is the probability increased given the location? Are there any recent sightings that people should be aware of before they attempt this?
So there's been sort of a drop in sightings recently. And according to some of the contactees I've talked about, our sun is, kind of going through coronal mass ejections and CMEs and stuff like this. So this has kind of caused a drop of activity because UFOs generally use magnetic fields to sort of navigate. And this is dangerous for them at this current time. So don't be too discouraged if you don't see anything. It doesn't mean they're not there. But yeah, it's basically, I think nighttime is the best time to see this, because that's, stuff in the sky is much more highly visible. And I think it's just a matter of dedication and staying up later at night, I think is much more conducive, because there's less, prying eyes, so to speak. And I think on occasions they are wanting to show themselves to certain people and not others, which they do have the ability to do.
Oh, that's a whole interesting. It's like a whole, like who don't they want to show themselves to?
I think that they have no interest in, freaking out people who are completely skeptical. If they don't want to traumatize people in any way, so they're not going to come down and completely freak out someone who's just not ready to accept their presence. This is, I think, one of the reasons we don't have open official contact, because there's a segment of our population who are dug in to their skepticism. They don't want to know, and they're not ready. They just are so fear-based or strict in their thinking for whatever reason, whether it's skepticism or what have you, that they respect that. They respect a person's autonomy. They're not going to blow apart your belief system. But if someone is out there really searching and wanting to know, they love that. And I'm saying this from a very
a little bit speculative, just based on your review of the evidence and your conversations with contactees.
Exactly. I mean, I can march out cases that will support this, is what I'm trying to say. It's not pure speculation.
Right.
This is absolutely something I found, patterns in these cases. Is that, and this is why I say, if you really, really want to see a UFO, follow these protocols. Bring a contactee, because they are effectively in communication, and bring someone who's very eager to see one, open-minded and ready, because those are the types of people ETs are like, yes, this person is ready. Let's show them that this is real. And they're slowly waking up humanity and wanting us to sort of come together and realize that we are not alone in this universe. That will, it's our prejudices, our divisiveness, our inability to spiritually evolve that is retarding our chances of open official contact. If we can come together and overcome wars and greed and corruption, they would be here overnight. I mean, it is our own responsibility to reach them halfway. They're not going to come down and just freak everybody out until we are ready. I think we're close. I think most people are ready. That is just sort of my assessment of the current situation. But this is a really interesting times here on Earth.
Yeah,
they've been warning,
good and bad.
I mean, they've been warning us for years how close we are to, environmental collapse and the dangers of nuclear proliferation, and how close we are to being in a very dangerous situation. So we will see what happens with our future, but ultimately I'm hopeful about it, because we do need change. We can't really continue on our current path. It's not sustainable. At some point, we do need to have peace on Earth. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why we don't have to worry, because anyone who's reached the ability to travel between the stars has reached a technological level where they can do this, and a spiritual level where they haven't destroyed themselves and have overcome that sort of thing. There's a very famous science fiction writer, Clifford Simak. He's my favorite science fiction writer, actually. And he never wrote about alien invasions. And he says, I just don't find it credible that any ETs would come here to kidnap people and use them as slave labor or take over our planet for resources and so forth, because they wouldn't need that. They already have access to all the resources they need. It's just not credible to me. is what he said. And I'm like, yes, I totally agree. So this is just one of many reasons, just from a firsthand contactees perspective. No, we don't have to worry. This is such good news for us. We're on the verge of being welcomed into a galactic community that is real. Just look at how many stars are out there. We're not alone. I mean, I understand skepticism. I do. I was a skeptic. Look at the evidence. Do your homework. You will be shocked how much evidence there is in support of this phenomena. It's real, and you can see a UFO if you want.
Now, if you could only debate Neil deGrasse Tyson and get him on the right side of of reality.
Yeah, I wonder about him because I feel, if I did an article on this, astronomers who have seen UFOs, and there's a long list. Clyde Tombaugh, the guy who discovered Pluto, had 2 very dramatic sightings. There's a long list of astronomers who have seen them. Dr. Lincoln LaPaz, he saw UFOs on numerous occasions. A lot of these astronomers have. If you're an astronomer, you're much more likely to see a UFO because you're out there looking at the sky.
Looking up at the sky, yeah.
And look it up. There's some very famous websites of like, here's 50 astronomers who've seen UFOs. And Neil deGrasse Tyson knows this. I wonder about him. I'm like, come on, bud.
I mean, it's almost like a personal. It's like a personal thing with him. It's kind of, it seems to extend beyond the realm of evidence. And
yeah, he better watch out. Naughty. I'm going to send the ETs to him and have him taken on board. I think he might know already this is UFOs and just protecting his reputation, or is on the wrong side of history.
In other words, aligned with folks who want to keep it under wraps. Maybe.
I can't say for sure. I don't know him, and I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. But I feel like anyone who's educates themselves on this subject, objectively looks at the evidence, cannot walk away unconvinced. I mean,
well, on that note, Preston, yeah, if I do get you started, we'll be on another hour and a half. And I know I want to be cognizant of your time, but I want to thank you for coming on again. As always, very illuminating, enlightening, and thought-provoking. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue over time.
Hey, I hope so. Yeah, I love this subject. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Preston.
If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.